This video is sponsored by MiniSwap. You ever start a project and you're really cooking on it, and then 5 years go by and they're still unpainted? Well, that is my Primaris Outriders, the Biker Marines from the legendary Indomitus box, the Space Marines versus the Necrons. These guys are super cool, and that is why I have them, and I put them together, and I have worked on them, but I've never managed to get them painted. I've never really worked them in any of my Space Marine lists. I played around with them a little bit on Tabletop Simulator, but never in real life, so maybe it's time to get a move on. I really like the Primaris Outriders. They are large and in-charge Space Marines on these big old bikes. I did a lot of kit bashing and converting on these suckers because they have a lance style ability on their datasheet. I gave them lance style weapons, extending the handles of these chain swords, and then wrapping them in a little bit of tin to make like an extra long purity seal. And I gave them each a little bouquet of candles up front. Are candles practical on a bike going 100 miles an hour? Probably. Oh, I also noticed that this guy has his helmet clipped to his belt, but I also put a helmet on his head. So, gonna have to fix that. Also, on all of these guys, I have this little flagpole sticking out the back. This is reminiscent of the old Space Marine bikes, and they each had a little flagpole sticking out the back. I could not figure out how to make a flag that would go on these, and I think that's what squashed this project back in the Dizzy. But now, I still don't know how to do it, but I'm gonna figure it out. It is high time to get some paint on the Primaris Outriders. It'll also be nice because next year, probably Warhammer 11th edition with a whole new gaggle of Space Marines, so I want to clear a little room in the old Black Templars pile of shame. These Outriders have been on and off my desk for years. It's time to make it happen. First, removing this helmet. I put it on before with plastic glue, so there's like a 50-50 shot it'll just pop right off, or I'll have to absolutely annihilate it with my hobby knife. After a little bit of clip-in, I got lucky and it fell right off. Just a little bit of cleanup and it'll be like it was never there. I found a nice bare head off the Primaris Crusader Squad kit and I stuck this on in its place. A nice mustachioed face. And while I have the bits out, I stuck down this little shoulder shield, which looks even more appropriate on these jousting riders. I built these piles of candles years ago and they turned out okay, but actually I feel like I want more. If we're doing candles, let's do some candles. I took some wire and used my hobby knife to cut off a little bit of the shielding, leaving me with a nice little wick. Then, to make the candle shafts look a little more natural and irregular, I used a lighter and slightly melted the ends. In no time, I had a nice little collection of scale candles, and to attach these, I used milliput before, but milliput is better for hard edge sculpting. For mushy, drippy wax, I think green stuff will do a better job. I stuck down a little blob of green stuff off the side of the bike armor, and I dripped a little bit of glue onto the ends of my candles, and I stuck them down into the putty. Using a ball and sculpting tool, I mushed down the green stuff up around the candles, and I pulled it down onto the armor. I made up some tiny worms of green stuff, and I put these down running off of my green stuff piles to make some drippy wax running down the sides. This is a pretty easy effect to pull off, and I gave each bike a bunch more candles. The machine spirits of these bikes should be very pleased to have so many lit candles honoring it. I also put a candle in the backpack of one of my Marines who didn't have too much going on. I trimmed up the end of my candle's wax in preparation to create the flames. I very carefully dripped the tip of my hot glue gun into the tips of the candles and slowly pulled them backwards, creating a little droplet of glue that followed the direction that these bikes are moving in. This was really effective on my new wire candles, a little more tricky to do with the epic basing resin candles, but in the end, I was able to get something that looked pretty decent. I cut off the long glue tails and I blasted each bike with my hairdryer to re-warm up the glue to melt the tails into rounded little droplets. Now my boys are really showing their reverence. I'm sure those candles won't get in the way of them seeing where they're going. These are some blinged out Outriders. If Games Workshop ever revamps the Ravenwing bikers for the Dark Angels, they'll probably look quite a bit like this. Now that I've got the bikes and their boys all done, it is time for these banners. I think I got some ideas on those banners. I have some scrap metals. This copper I think I bought for this project, but it turns out it's way too thin, thinner than paper. I would like to use copper because it's so soft, but this is too soft. This thin steel should work. It's also on the flimsy side, but it's not too flimsy. In a perfect world, I'd have something just a hair thicker, but I bet I can make this work. I took a roller and used it to clean up the metal, rolling out all the little waves and wrinkles. Then I took a straight edge and trued up the sides of the metal. My nice big scissors blasted straight through the metal with no problem. Now to figure out a shape. I drew out a very rough triangle, the size I wanted to end up with a Sharpie. I took some measurements off of this and then I drew it out properly on another playing card, learning that this paint pen is not a good tool to use with a ruler. Once I had the shape of the pendant, I double checked if I liked the size, and now I need to figure out how to attach it. I want to make 3 little arms that stick out so that I can bend and fold over the pole to attach it to the flag. I measured out this shape and I cut it out of another playing card, gluing the 2 pieces together so that I had my shape. I tried again with the paint pen, but to no success. I found very gently scoring the metal with a hobby knife worked to leave me with an impression. I used my scissors to do the big cuts, and my hobby blade could just barely make it through the metal with enough pressure. Now that I have my pendant, it took some more brass the same size as the one on my bikes, and I folded the tabs over, using some more round wire to help me press down the metal, and once I was happy with the shape, I carefully slid it off my scrap wire and slid it into place on my bikes, using some super glue to permanently attach it. I think this worked out pretty good. I used my template to build 2 more to give the whole squad an identical flag. With this template, I could build as many as I want. And if I wanted to buy some more, a great place to pick them up would be today's sponsor, MiniSwap. Are you ready to finally tackle your pile of shame? Or maybe you're looking to add to it? Well, look no further than today's sponsor, MiniSwap, an all-new marketplace exclusively dedicated to buying and selling miniatures. On MiniSwap, everything is bought and sold at a fair price, so you can get the best bang for your buck with easy listing, low seller fees, and prepaid shipping labels. They've got a growing catalog of every Games Workshop miniature ever made, and are expanding into other miniature games as well. Looking to pick up that rare mini you can't find on shelves anymore? Then look no further. MiniSwap is a great place to go and find minis new on sprue. Who needs the box when you can get the plastic? I love looking through these listings, knowing I'll get to build the mini exactly how I want, without needing to splash out extra money on parts I won't use or the box. If you act now, first-time buyers get free shipping on their first purchases, and first-time sellers get a 0% commission fee for the first 90 days. Don't miss out. If you register today, you'll start receiving emails letting you know about all kinds of special offers. I'm very excited to see a site like this, built by dedicated hobbyists who know the ins and outs of buying used minis. Y'all know I'm a big fan of taking something previously loved and giving it its 3rd or 4th coat of paint. So click the link in the description below to make an account and get mini-swapping today. Now that I have successfully achieved some flags, I finished off the bikes. I used some foam previously to make it look like the wheels were kicking up some dust, and I used some texture paste to add to the smoke, like some pebbles are getting launched up at the extreme force of these super bikes. And I put this texture paste over the wheels as well. They should be dirty, like they've been driving through the desert for a while. I clipped off some more skulls from the Citadel Skulls box. I'm going to use these to cap off the ends of the flagpoles. This also harkens back to the OG biker kit, which had skulls topping the flagpoles. These bikes are finally nearing completion. Space Marine Outriders are a nifty little unit. They clock in at 80 points, which is pretty darn cheap, but they're cheap because they're not very good. They don't do a ton of damage. They get a couple of chainsword swings and a couple of bolter shots each, but overall, their damage output is a little bit less than like a squad of 5 assault intercessors. And you don't want to be doing less damage than a squad of assault intercessors. Now, there are some pros in the Outrider camp. 4 wounds each at toughness 5, 12 wounds on the squad, and objective control 2. So these are bigger, tankier Space Marines. That 4 wounds is really nice because it means that damage 3 weapons, they're going to be doing a lot of wasted damage trying to take out these suckers. So the Outriders are not setting the world on fire, but maybe they should be in the Firestorm Assault attachment, probably the best attachment for bikes. You maximize these to a squad of 6, then you attach a Primaris ATV and a Chaplain on bike. This is starting to add up, but it's still like 300 points, or it's 310 points with a particular enhancement to blank 1 damage per turn. All of a sudden, you've got darn close to 40 wounds of toughness 5 and a fabulous contender for doing Armor of Contempt for the +1 armor save. Like, I don't know what unit can do 40 damage per turn. Now, when you max everything out, it doesn't just get more survivable, it does start to get slightly good. With all of these different weapons, that's like 22 bolter shots, and the Chaplain can give it once per game devastating wounds, so that's like 4 or 5 devastating wounds. Then they can throw grenades with the grenades keyword for another 3 mortal wounds, so that is a decent amount of damage coming in before they've gotten into close combat. Another really good thing about these bikes is the humongous bases. 7 of these bases plus an ATV will turn like a quadrant of the board into an absolute parking lot. I've actually played a game with this big brick of bikes in Tabletop Simulator, and there was a little something to it. I completely biffed it on generating mortal wounds, but they managed to do a little bit of business before getting on the wrong end of a Rogel Dorn. The max squad is kind of cheesy, but I think a 3-man squad, just cheap and cheerful at 80 points, is the way to go. Finally, at long last, some paint is hitting these models. I gave my trio a Black Prime and then a Zenithal of Waiting from Above. A classic start to my Black Templars. After the Zenithal, I sealed it in with some satin varnish. I like to do this as a little insurance. That ink layer can be fragile, especially when step 2 is to dunk the models in contrast paint. My Black Templar recipe is a mix of Games Workshop Black Templar, Leviathan Blue, and Lamian Medium. This trio gives me a very cold blue-black that is perfect for my Templar armor. I painted this all over the bike and Space Marine armor, working in sections to try and minimize the pooling. Once that was dry, I dusted on a little bit of gray through the airbrush to lighten and smooth the tops of the model, and then I came back in with my contrast paint through the airbrush to darken the lower halves of the bikes. Then I finished the armor off with a dry brushing of gray to highlight the armor edges. The armor is about 75% of these bikes. Another big item is the metal. My favorite tool to make good looking metal is Speed Paint Noble Skin, which is a gray with a brown tinge. I put this all over the stabilizer bar, the handlebars, bolter, and exhausts. And while I was waiting for that to dry, I put black speed paint over the wheels. With the Noble Skin dry, I dry brushed on some silver paint over the metal bits to give them a nice shine. And for those exhaust covers, I want these to look burnt. I used some brown speed paint and glazed this over the metal to tint it, and after a few coats I gave these spots another dry brushing of silver. I put some silver over the chest Imperialises and then hit them with a black wash. These guys are coming together pretty quick. Next up, the handles. I paint every weapon handle in my army purple. I don't remember why, but that's what I've always done. After a purple base coat, I put on a purple speed paint and then did a little highlighting up the shaft with some pink paint. Now onto the shoulder pads. I started out with some bone tan speed paint, then I used some brown speed paint very watered down and glazed this over the shoulders. Then I quickly wiped the tops clean with a fresh brush, leaving me with a bright spot in the center surrounded by dirt and grime. And to further brighten up the shoulders, I used my airbrush to put a little puff of white paint in the center of each shoulder pad. After that, I moved on to the red, and there is quite a bit of it. I made up a darker red for a base coat, and I put this over the flag, all the candles, and the Space Marine shoulder trim. Typically, Black Templar Crusaders have black trim, but I like to make mine red, to get a little bit more color onto my boys. For the candles, I used a dry brush to lay down a mid-tone red quickly over the wax, and I finished it off with some pure saturated bright red. The candles I could do easily with a dry brush, but for the shoulder trim, I have to work carefully with a brush. I started out putting down some highlights with a white paint. These are the spots that I want to end up the brightest. Then I glazed some saturated red over the white, creating a quick gradient from the dark base to as bright as I can possibly get the red. Then to brighten it up even more, I cheated and I used an orangey red to do some edge highlights right along the spots that I have the brightest red. I'm able to get away with using lots of dry brushing and washes on my Templar, so I like to really splash out on the painting spots. The shoulder trim was fun, and now it's time to painstakingly paint the Black Templar cross onto the faces of all my battle brothers. I don't know how many times I painted this at this point. I'll have to take a head count one of these days. Once the crosses were on there, I used the red from my palette to paint the eyes, making them bright towards the front and then adding a small specular highlight of white to make the lenses look shiny. With some fine painting done, I moved back to the airbrush, blasting some white ink through the airbrush to start a gradient on the flags. And while I had the white ink out, I sprayed this over the screens on their controls. This is probably indispensable for letting them see over the candles that are blocking their line of sight to the road. After the white, I hit these computer screens with a dusting of neon green, and then I threw some red ink into my airbrush and sprayed this over the flags. With so much paint on these minis, I paused and hit them with another coat of satin varnish. You can't be too careful, and this will help out later. Ooh, these guys are singing. These are some Black Templars Space Marines. If High School Jay, working on his Black Templars, could see these models, could know that this is what the Black Templars army would become, both in painting experience and in just the upgrade of the models. I remember during like a snow day painting up some tactical marines, and I would always keep all of the shoulder pads separate. I had them all stuck onto like a piece of cardboard, so it was a little easier to apply the decals, because at that time I had like a 50% success rate of getting the decal on properly. And speaking of decals, oh, there's so much room on these suckers for some decals. I love decals. It's one of my favorite tools to spice up any mini, and we have quite a few different sheets available at EonsOfBattle.com. One lovely spot for decals is the big flat armor of these bikes. I used the prayer sheets to fill up a lot of space, and then I stuck down a little campaign badge right next to it. Then I moved on to applying all the Templar crosses to their shoulder pads. I really like that the Black Templars have a big variety of these in shape and color. No two initiates should ever look the same. On one bike, I threw on a big old Templar cross, and on the front, I snuck in a skull, putting on the tiniest little cross onto the forehead. Now onto the banners, and I was a little worried that it'd be hard to crush down the decals without bending and breaking my banners, but I was able to get them on there without too much fuss. I held the flag flat against the table while pressing down on the decals. Once I was happy with the amount of bling on my Marines, I sealed it all in with more satin varnish. To finish off these pendants, I did some sponging to make the flags look like they had some texture, doing one pass of a dark red on the bottom half, and then bright red everywhere. Now that all the paint has been applied, I used the handle of a pen and a paintbrush to bend in some waves. I bet these flags are really flapping in the wind once the Marines get up to ramming speed. Now there's just a few things left to pick out, like the computer screens. I used some Ghillie-Doo speed paint, doing a few layers to darken the screens. Then I took a sharp brush and I carefully painted a grid using some lines of white paint. Once those were on there, I made some dots of red. These might be the enemy targets that the computer is spotting. I finished off the screens with another glazing of Ghillie-Doo to darken it. I don't get to paint nearly enough sci-fi screens. Now onto those weapons. I usually paint chainswords yellow. I gave these a few coats of warm white to prime them, and then I glazed some nice saturated yellow for the color. While I had the yellow out, I hit the shoulder shield of my sergeant. And after some highlighting and glazing of red and orange, I had it looking nice. I took the same recipe for the yellow from the shields and I put this onto the swords, glazing yellow and orange to give it some more contrast. Dark yellow was usually brown, so I cheated in orange to keep up the vibrancy. Now for battle damage. I sponged on some white paint. This will be the basis for scratches over the yellow. Then I took some gunmetal paint and I painted this over the white sponging, leaving a little bit of it showing through. Then I put this over the teeth of the chainsword. With the blades done, I painted up the rest of the wraps using some tan, white, and brown to paint up a gradient following the shading and highlighting of the zenithal that was still peeking through. I hit my purity seals. I can tell that these were sculpted a few years ago. They are round. That's about all I can say about them. I picked out all the little Templar symbols that I put on the bikes. These are a mix from the new and old Black Templar upgrade frames. They add some nice razzle-dazzle to my vehicles. I should probably paint some more Black Templar vehicles. With the symbols done, it's time for the mustachioed man himself. I base coated him in a red beige, then glazed some magenta over his head. I like to use really bright, vibrant colors for faces. My Templar are mostly black, so any color I can use adds a lot. After a wash of Cadian flesh tone, I mixed some white into my beige paint and started highlighting, really hitting his forehead, brows, and cheeks, doing a few layers until he was looking bright. Now for the moment I have been waiting for, the mustache. I base coated it in a dark gray and then I did some very fine lines of a light gray to highlight his impressive stash. I threw these colors onto his eyebrows as well. He might be the only Marine in my collection with painted eyebrows. He kinda looks like J. Jonah Jameson. With the face done, I painted all the candle flames. It looks like a fair amount of primer got knocked off from all the handling. Hopefully they won't get touched so much now that the painting is done. I base coated them in yellow, then used orange, red, and black speed paint to create a gradient for the candle flames, turning into smoke as they move away from the wicks. I put one dot of white paint on the bellies of each flame to make the brightest spot, and now to give my Marines a final look. I used some more Black Templar contrast paint to darken the bottoms of the bikes, tinting the decals to match the highlights and shadows on the bikes. After a fourth and final varnish, I took some silver paint and sponged this over the black armor, creating some chips and scratches to show the wear and tear these bikes have taken over the eons of battling. Looking at these guys, I'm feeling really jazzed about Space Marine bikes. I just wish they were a little bit better in-game. I mean, it is a Space Marine riding a baby tank, and on the tabletop, they're just kind of fine. If Games Workshop really wanted to step these guys up a little bit, let them have some special weapons. I mean, the Imperial Guard, every one of their horsey riders gets a power sword, but the Space Marines riding their mechanical steeds don't get to have anything but chain swords and bolt pistols. Just one power fist per squad would really bump up their damage potential. And Games Workshop could totally do it. These guys are still the old Indominus Sprue, the easy to build kit. If they came out with a multi-part plastic kit, they better come out with some options. If these guys can take a power fist, I will take a Dremel to these guys immediately. Somebody's losing an arm if it can be replaced by a power fist. To get these bikes battle ready, I airbrushed some watery Vallejo earth over the bases, letting this spill over the bottoms of the bike to look like dust has been kicked up. Once that was dry, I dry brushed over the ground and the tires with some Pro Acryl Olive Flesh to highlight all the rocks and the sand on the bases. Then I painted the rims of the base black, but they are not done yet. These bikes need some names. Top supporters on our website get their names immortalized as members of my crusade. These custom nameplates are also something we sell on our website, EonsOfBattle.com. On our website, we have all kinds of hobby goodies, army painter paints, brushes, texture pastes, wet palettes, basing cork, decals, toppers, and bits, and we have terrain. It's the best way to support us doing what we do by getting a membership. Each month, members get a credit good for any one terrain pack we have ever made, or the brand new one. Our new terrain for December, the Bubble City. Embrace your inner amphibian with this alien encampment, a truly unique series of aquatic structures like the Bubble House, Bubble Command Center, and Bubble Fortress. And it's not just buildings, it also has some powerful defenses in the turret and shield walls. Get ready to get immersed in some underwater goodness, perfect for all the popular wargames. I hit these names with the black prime and then a few coats of gold paint, and once that was dry, I dripped in some dark brown panel liner to fill in all the in-between letters. Then I wiped them clean with a makeup wedge to reveal the gilded names. I stuck these onto the front of my bases with some super glue, and the 3 newest members of my crusade are ready to take to the roads. 6 years in the making. Finally, the Outrider squad is done. And I know I've been poo-pooing these guys, but I'm pretty excited to have this squad done because I do think I'm gonna be including it in my lists. Every single list that I write for my Black Templars, I've pretty much always included a squad of Assault Intercessors with Jump Pack, and they've They've been useful, but typically what happens is they hang out in my home field like turn 1 or turn 2, then they hop out, score me a secondary, and then immediately die. These guys are the exact same points cost, but they're considerably tougher. And so I feel like these guys might be way better in that role because a lot of the things that end up wiping my jump pack squad are not gonna be able to handle these guys in quite the same way. Also, they look really cool. That could honestly be a factor. If my opponent sees Assault Intercessors, they're gonna think, that's 5 Space Marines, I know what 5 Space Marines do, I know 11 different ways in my army to deal with 5 Space Marines. But they see these guys literally roll up. They're gonna start questioning what they have to do to deal with these. I am very excited to finally have a 3-man squad of Outriders. I've been doing a lot of 3-man Space Marine squads. I did the Inceptors, I did the Aggressors, and now I've done the Outriders. And really now that I have 1 squad done, I just wanna bump them up. I want more bikes, I want more Inceptors, I want more Aggressors. I just want more Space Marines. I gotta get on it. Thanks for watching.